if we all manage to reflect in a very pure way with ourselves why we are here and why we've chosen this profession, I think a lot of things solve themselves.
Today I'm talking to Laura Oomens. She is a violinist in the Netherlands Chamber Orchestra and a cultural entrepreneur. I'm Jenny Reinecke, and I'm a singer in professional chamber choirs and a leadership coach. And we are going to talk about leadership. I wanted to start with asking Laura, in your opinion, what's the status quo at the moment regarding leadership? Just what comes out of your mind and heart?
Well, generally, what I see at the moment, the kind of leadership that emerges at the moment is one that is under pressure. And I think it's more visible that this kind of leadership, which I describe as kind of an old school leadership, is on its way out, which is based on power. It's based on top-down management very often. It's based on decision-making by oneself or just in a very small team. And I think that one is running out of energy and of sources.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see that it's running out of energy and of sources? I mean, what are the signs that we can see in our days?
Well, I think quite obviously, if we look to the East, European countries, especially Russia and Ukraine, there's a war happening that is, in my view, happening because somebody is very much using just their own idea of what the world should look like, and who is imposing his power onto a lot of people. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, and I'm not entitled to speak very much about this. I'm not into politics so much that I can really have a qualified opinion about this. But what I see is that there is no leadership which leads to blossoming. This is putting things down. It's destroying. It's about death. It's about taking things which are not yours. And I think that is not the kind of leadership that we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's reflected in all areas, this kind of leadership from the old times, let's say, that's still having its branches in every field, in every professional field, I think, or at least mostly. I think that in startup companies that just were founded recently, there is a very much new approach. But when we look at our field, then we also see these hierarchies and top-down management and decision-making that's very separated from the organism of let's say, ensemble, if it is an orchestra or a choir. So it's in our field as well, in the arts, which are of course rooted in old traditions. And also there, I feel so strongly that there is a need for change. What did you experience, or what do you experience in these days regarding that in our field?
Well, if I go back a little bit in my history of being a musician, I was trained in Germany and I grew up there. I studied there. And as you probably know, you're very much growing up with this hierarchy in mind of being very respectful to your teachers and to the elderly, and always saying Sie, as in being formal, Herr Professor, which is great. And also otherwise, vice versa, the professor would also say Sie to the student, and there's this kind of understanding. What also happened a lot was like, I'm, as your professor, I know best what's good for you, and I'm telling you to do this or that. And in hindsight, it would have been even more fruitful for any musician's development to also look at, so what do you bring, and what can I encourage in you in order to blossom as you, with your instrument or with your whatever it is you do, instead of telling your student, like, you're coming to me because I know best what's good for you and I'm going to tell you how to do it. So it's like leadership should be active, as in encouraging the other one to bring out the best in themselves. That is true leadership. And that is something that even in orchestras, of course, you have a conductor most of the time. There are lots of different types of conductors. I've seen them all. I've seen conductors that are very old-fashioned and are telling us, like, this is how you do it. And if you don't do it according to my willing, I'm going to even punish you for it. You know, I'm letting you play. Last desks, please play, because it was not in tune. I've witnessed these things. And it used to be completely accepted to do it this way. Whereas I think now, most conductors these days are very well aware that it is nice when they know that they should only contribute in a way that it benefits the ensemble, because it's the ensemble, whether it is a choir or an orchestra, that has to make the sound and has to produce the music. It's interesting that, for example, in criticism in the newspaper, it's always the conductor that stands out, or the conductor did this to the orchestra, the conductor, it was amazing because of, and then I always think, yeah, that's great, it's wonderful to have this conductor, but ultimately the musicians in the ensemble made it happen. We also have to make it happen if the conductor is not that great. So I think, leadership has to transform along the way, having grown up exactly with this kind of, you obey to your teacher and do as they say. Since I'm coaching people myself now, I notice that I don't want to teach that way, because it's not me or the highway. It's them, and I want for them to blossom in their own specific, beautiful way.
And do you have a feeling that this this change that is now slowly starting to happen, is that coming from the a new, let's say, behavior or a new mindset of the musicians in the ensemble, or is it coming from a new style of leadership of the leaders that encourages a little bit more the blossoming, what you said?
That's a bit of a question, like we in Dutch say, the kip of het ei verhaal.
Yeah, exactly. What is it? Chicken or egg?
I think there's no one who starts that. I think it's also the time we're living in. We're facing more challenges suddenly after many decades of having a fairly uncomplicated life here in the West, where we're so fortunate to live in prosperity and without wars. There wasn't, since I was about 12 years old, there was no nuclear threat anymore. I witnessed the wall come down in Germany. So everything seemed sort of fairly okay and going the right way. And I think at least since Corona and everything that has happened since in all the different fields, we all sense that this is serious, and we need to focus on what really matters, and which is to keep ourselves together, literally. Like we need each other. We need each other as humans, but also the other way. There's no music. I mean, if we need to play together, and I think a nice example is the Netherlands Chamber Orchestra, where we've worked mostly without a conductor for years now. And we have, of course, a very charismatic and strong leader, Gordon Nikolic. But it's about doing things together, breathing together, feeling things together, bringing in ideas. And it might not always be completely democratic, which cannot be in a big group like that. You know how you have to progress in your work and everything. But I think that has taught me a lot about how it's possible if everybody brings their best forward. You can create something truly magnificent and unique as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I once had a project where we didn't have a conductor with us in the choir, and that was quite weird because we did the Fauré Requiem, and that was of course with orchestra, and the first violin, she was basically conducting with her body. It was really easy to follow, but singers alone, they don't move. In a choir, it's kind of a taboo to move too much. And then we sang one piece of Avo Pert, and everybody was still, and it was really, the music was also not really, not rhythmical like that. You could feel it was very slow piece and so difficult, and we were just trying to move as little as possible. It's so weird with a choir without conductor. That's still a challenge to overcome, I would say.
Well, I think it's interesting what you say about moving. I mean, I've been brought up feeling or knowing that also in a big orchestra one shouldn't move because you're disturbing your colleague. You're distracting by moving too much. And then in the chamber orchestra, it's complete liberation because we have to move if we want to understand what we're saying, and if the groups have to play together. I mean, there has to be some kind of indication of where we breathe or where we, and it happens naturally. And I think that could happen in a choir as well if a choir were to work without a conductor sometimes on a regular basis. I'm sure you find your way of understanding each other's body language.
Yeah, I really hope so, because I'm one of those singers who rather moves a bit too much. So when I see videos, it's always like, with the music and okay. That's a long story behind also singing techniques that teachers say you shouldn't move too much because you're disturbing your breath and the sound by moving your instrument because it's inside. But I wanted to. You brought me to share something else. I was just wondering because you are already so far also with the Netherlands Chamber Orchestra in this mindset of how do we approach really being together and everything. I was thinking, how did it even come up for me, this whole topic of leadership? How did it enter my life and how did it become so important? And actually, it was because I was really disappointed because I came out of these youth choirs before the studies, and inside my study program, I had a very good chamber choir, and it was also, everybody was there basically for fun. Okay, you need to do 2 or 3 semesters to get your points, but then I just stayed because I loved it so much, and that's why I wanted to be a professional choir singer. Really, like what was my plan A. And I got warned before that it's not like that anymore then in the professional life, that you basically sing until 2 in the night and next morning you rehearse at 10 and everybody has so much fun, and if you rehearse an hour longer, it doesn't matter. And it's not like that. It's then a job. And I didn't want to believe it. But then when I actually arrived, I had so many experiences that disappointed me regarding what I found out only later regarding leadership. For example, I mean, I also had a lot of positive experiences, and that's the ensembles that I still work with now because I really made very tough decisions. I'm not destroying myself with conductors that yell at the singers, for example. I mean, I thought this is impossible. That I experienced this before, maybe when I was a soloist with a church choir, and that there was a conductor that was a bit helpless and he started to yell at the people, and it was shocking for me also then. But when I was then arriving in this, for my opinion, safe harbor of now the professional ensembles, and there were still conductors that yelled at the choir, or we were conducted whole concerts just with a fist, and that's like killing the voices. we were mocked, and there were so many conflicts that derived from this old-fashioned way of leadership, or this very much dealing with power leadership, that I really I needed to figure this out somehow and to do everything I can to bring a change. And I wonder, what is your reason, if you may share, if you want to share?
I need to think about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, as I already sort of mentioned, is like I grew up throughout my life with this kind of leadership, having been to Germany, but also having a family that is into music, and very specifically a father that was trained in a very old school way as a violinist as well. He was my teacher for 8 years. Mm-hmm. And we both studied later on. I mean, I studied with his teacher later on, Herman Krebers, who was a marvelous teacher, really. I mean, very old school and very wonderful. He was like a grandfather to me almost. For 7 years, I was just inhaling his music and all the repertoire before I went to college. So that was amazing. And yet in a very old-fashioned style, where it is, I tell you to do so and so. So in my case, fingerings, bowings, dynamics. And of course, when you're very young, you need that kind of training as well. I mean, you need to grow and you need to experience these things. And then later on, when I was in Berlin with a teacher that also taught me a lot of things, most importantly, how to practice properly, really going into detail and really reflect and mirror your own doings. And we, like singers, do a lot of things that we're not aware of. And yet, I had a lot of moments during those studies that I thought that could have been handled differently. I saw a lot of students that were discouraged, that were dropping out, that completely lost faith in their own abilities, despite amazing talent and musicality. And I think you have to have a certain strength inside to be able to deal with this kind of leadership. And I think I came across precisely this way of leading quite a lot in my life, and I'm used to it, so I can handle it. I don't get scared by it, and yet I think it's time to let go of it. I think it doesn't do any good, and I see that it destroys sometimes more than it actually does good. I see it with students sometimes coming out of conservatory that are completely shell-shocked when they have to audition, because they think, but I've been told it has to be this way and it has to be that way and it has to be so and so. And then they get stuck. They don't know even how to produce their own music anymore. Like, they don't feel anymore what they want to express. And it's hard if you have to, for example, play a Mozart concerto over and over and over again, because that's the standard work in the first round of an audition. But this very same Mozart concerto is so intrinsically beautiful. It's so wonderful, but we don't see that anymore after so many times of overthinking, over preparing, over worrying these things. And it only needs one person in life to tell you, look, let go of all these ideas. You've done your bit. You've learned your technique. You've done your diploma. Everything. It's fine. Now trust your musicianship and start to discover it. And it's fine if you stumble. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay if you sound ugly, because you're on the way to discovering what you want.
We could probably talk half an hour about how we deal with failure. I already thought, okay, the word failure. We're opening a big field of experience there probably as well. That we will maybe do another time, because it's also really, really interesting, because it's also connected to this, what old way of leadership doesn't really accept failure, and that scares everybody.
I noticed that students that come to me for the first time, they're nervous, they are a bit stuck, they apologize for existing, basically. I mean, they come in and say, sorry, it worked better at home. That kind of, and we all know it. We've all been there. And I just think, wow, I'm not a professor. I'm just someone who's here to help. Basically, I'm offering my ear and my heart to people for them to be able to grow. That's all I do. I'm not telling them what's right or wrong. I'm telling them, I hear this. Do you want this? Okay, then maybe we can make it more convincing. Oh, you don't want that? Okay, maybe then we should try it another way. You know, I'm trying to really awaken their own senses, because I think ultimately, and that is maybe the essence of leadership, in my opinion, as it should be, if you manage to strengthen everybody's talents to the full and everybody's ability, then you create abundance, because then everybody can contribute and feel worthy. That's also a very important one. People have to feel worthy and have to feel appreciated, and everybody wants to be seen. So we don't thrive when we have one leader who tells us what's right and wrong and where we should just obey. I think a leader should encourage people to bring out the best and throw it into the mix, and then we can blossom.
Absolutely. That directly another question came up. So now we both are also entrepreneurs in different fields, but we are both parts of ensembles. So we are actually the followers, the ones that are more downstream in these old hierarchies. Now we are talking about leadership. So what do you think leadership should mean to the people that play the instruments, actually, or the singers, the members of the ensemble?
Well, I think, first of all, it is important to accept that there is one person that is appointed leader. There is a reason for that, because otherwise you have chaos, right? So it happens sometimes that we end up in discussions that lead nowhere because everybody thinks something else and has another idea. So it's nice to have somebody who can absorb that and bundle it into one thing that we can work with. And well, of course, a leader should also have like a strong idea, a strong vision of what they want. So I think as an ensemble player in the Nederlands Kamerorkest, I also have to accept if things don't go according to what I would like, and that's fine too. I think it's very important to also keep in mind the common goal, the common way. What's best for the ensemble right now? What do we need? Do I really need to say something? Maybe it's not necessary, then I won't. I will keep my mouth shut. Does it disturb the process, or does it benefit the process? Does it help to say it right now, or not anymore, or not yet? Yeah, and sometimes things don't work out the way I'd like to see it, and then that's what it is. I mean, then I have to just accept it. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah. I think this is maybe now also something for another time, but then there is also the question, how do we define leadership? And for me, there is always this inner leadership, and leadership if you are the leader of a group or of a musical end result. And I find that in this old way of leadership, we tend to give away also our inner leadership to a decision maker, and that's probably where we start losing ourselves and our inspiration. Because this is just what is demanded, basically, to not really have an opinion, to not speak up, even if it's really necessary. And I agree with you. There needs to be one person that has the the overall picture in their hands and guides everybody there. But this, especially in the field of professional music, everybody should have and all the time work on their inner leadership, on their values, on their principles, how to act in the world, and how to behave with oneself and with each other. And this is something where we don't just need, let's say, conductors and management that think newly of leadership, but each and every one of us has to.
That is a very important one that you mentioned, because I mean, we're talking inner and outer leadership now. Inner leadership also means that even if a situation is not to your liking or not as ideal as you would want to, as an individual in the ensemble, you can still behave in a way that you create the best possible outcome for example, your group. Like I'm in this orchestra, I'm sub leader, second violin, which means I'm assisting to my first desk, to the leader, by also passing things to the back, making sure that he can do his work. So I'm also like a co-pilot. I see myself that way a lot. But it also means that sometimes by being less strong in my playing, I encourage the back to play more, for example. Or to make sure that the group is happy, that they can all see the leader. So, it requires looking back, like, is everybody okay back there? Is everybody happy? Are there any questions? So you can make sure that at least the atmosphere in your direct surroundings is in such a way that the focus is on maximum for the whole result. And it can mean that as a leader, you also speak, you sometimes speak up, which happens as well. And then it's for a good reason.
Yeah, for a good reason, and in a moment where it fits and
hopefully,
and it's constructive. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. There's never the right moment. No. And this again, basically, maybe we can even close the circle there a little bit. What you just said, that should be for every person in the world. Look at their surroundings, taking care for that, giving space where it's needed, taking the responsibility where it's needed. And there we can, through our beautiful profession of making music and having basically leadership as an audible result, we can be an example and inspire the people that come to listen to us to take the same inner leadership and become the most shining and responsible and space-giving version of themselves. And I think this is also what we need in the world. We don't just need the people that drain and lead officially to be able to do that, but each and every one can make a difference there. And if they look at us and get inspired to do so, and hear us and get inspired to do so, at least in my ideal world, I imagine that this would have a great effect, besides going to nice concerts.
I also think I would even go back to what you said earlier about the moment that you realized that the professional world is not as fun as your times as a student in choirs used to be. And I remember that realization very well when I came from the Gustav Mahler Youth Orchestra, being on tour for 6 weeks and just playing Mahler 4 and Mahler 8 and being with all these great conductors and this atmosphere of doing this together. I remember very much the grand feeling of that. And of course, it will never be the same. And I've been warned, like you before, like, just remember, it won't ever be the same again. And yet, I think if we all manage to reflect in a very pure way with ourselves why we are here and why we've chosen this profession, and because we all love music, right? So if we are only on stage with the idea of wanting to play this beautiful music, I think a lot of things solve themselves. However, if we sit on stage with the idea of wanting a perfect result, or wanting to prove something, whatever it is, to ourselves or to somebody else, then it's not pure anymore. And then it's not purely for the music, and it's not benefiting the music anymore. And then you get all these frictions, and then you get the leadership problems. But I think as soon as we're all just being in the art of playing music, singing music, then the audience will pick it up, and then the audience will feel like, wow, this is life changing. They will perceive that. I think it's so much about energy. When you perform, people pick up immediately, whether they're trained listeners or not. I mean, I always advocate for everybody is welcome. I want everybody to be able to enjoy music, because I think it's possible. Whole other topic, we talk about that another time. But yeah. But I do believe that if your heart is pure, the moment you are on stage and you're playing, they will pick it up. Yeah.
You said that so beautifully, Laura. I think we just round it up here and say goodbye for today.
Thank you
to the people that listened until here.
Yes.
It was amazing to talk to you about this, and yeah, let's go on.
Very, very inspiring to talk to you as well.
Okay, we love to hear from everybody who has experiences or an opinion on this, and write in the comments, write to us, and yeah, let's keep the conversation going.